Hey everybody, good morning. It's June 11th, Wednesday. It's time for our Wednesday weekly webinar. The topic today is the phases of retirement spending. You may have heard of the go-go, slow-go, or no-go, or go-go, slow-go, and no-go phases of retirement spending. And we're going to talk about if this is something you should follow, pay attention to, or if it's one of those myths and misconceptions that you should just disregard. So we'll get into that at about the 30-minute mark. So we've got a new section that we're starting this week, and I'd really love your comments on that, your feedback on it. So either in the comment section or send me an email. I always love the feedback in the emails, especially, of course, if you're watching this. If you're not watching this live, but if you're watching the recording, of course, you can comment as well. And if you're just listening to it on a podcast, you can email us at questions@attleboroughwealth.com. That's questions@attleboroughwealth.com. Or you can find that our email information on our website at attleboroughwealth.com. Like I've been telling you, the podcast is gaining more and more traction every week or every month. We see more and more downloads, so I appreciate that. But what I'm going to add this week, I'll just share with you. So our typical outline is we spend about 15 minutes with slot updates. So I usually have a report and a Q&A section. And then we do about 15 minutes of market updates. And then I have a financial planning topic that we call our financial focus. So again, that comes in at about the 30-minute mark. If you're, if you're figuring out how much of this video you want to watch on a recording or where to choose the index. But this week and going forward, I'm going to start adding a Social Security update. So we have this great analyst, Heather Schreiber, on our team. And Heather is one of the most respected Social Security analysts in the nation. And she puts out some great information to us on a regular basis. Then I was reading her updates and I thought, why aren't I sharing this with you folks? So just like the Slott Reports, I'm going to take excerpts from her reports that she sends us, and I hope you find it beneficial. So we're going to start that today. So again, I'd love to hear your feedback. We've had some changes here at Attleboro Wealth Management. Many of you who are clients have seen this already. So we've added a lot of people to our team over the past year, and they're really, really high performing, really great people. I spent a lot of time interviewing folks and spending time and finding the right people for our team. But one of the folks who just joined us recently is going to be our new chief investment officer. So we have some changes to our investment committee process that I'm very, very excited about. So more about that as that continues to unfold. And let's get into headlines. So headlines, big headline this morning. It's on our one of our discussion points for our investment topics is inflation, consumer price index. So inflation, that number came out this morning, just before airtime here. So CNBC reported that U.S. inflation rises 0.1% in May from prior month. That's less than expected. So it's still an increase, but less than expected. So the consumer price index increased, as I said, 0.1% for the month, putting the annual inflation rate at 2.4%. Historically, still pretty darn low. That's a good number to see. Excluding food and energy, core CPI came in respectively at 0.1% and 2.8%, compared with forecasts for 0.3% and 2.9%. So what I'm giving you there is the monthly number followed by the annual number: 0.1%, 2.8%, and 0.3%. and 2.9%. Weakness in energy prices helped offset some of the increases, and a handful of other key items expected to show tariff-related jumps. Vehicle and apparel prices in particular actually posted declines. So good news, some surprising good news in my opinion, regarding consumer price index or inflation. Good morning, Denise. Good morning, Leighton. Good to see you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so this is the Slott Report this week, and so you can see this actually just came out this morning. So hot off the presses. And this is when you should name a trust as a beneficiary. So let me back up for a second before I get into this. I didn't say what I usually say during this. So I've got some goals for you for this webinar. And the first is to stay educated. So this is about education. This is not about advice. So when you see things, when you should name a trust as IRA beneficiary, this is not advice from me to you to say, hey, if you have these situations, you should. This is about education and opening you up to ideas about how you might want to do things differently. So I want you to stay educated. I want you to open your mind to looking at things differently. Many of the things that we talk about are different than what many people are doing out there. And I want you to have an open mind to do things differently in your investment management and financial planning techniques. We're going to get into that today in our financial planning topic about how we do things very, very differently. So stay educated, open your mind to different ideas, stay updated. So use these webinars to stay updated on things so that you can keep track of your progress and you're not closing the door on maybe some things you've learned before, because that's a danger. You come to a class or you listen to these webinars or you read a book and you say, wow, this is something different. And I should pay attention to this. And then sometimes we fall back in our old ways. It's kind of like how the gyms are so busy in the beginning of the year, and then it falls off very, very quickly. Usually by the end of January, it's all the same old people. You don't want to be in that situation, whether if it's your physical fitness or your financial fitness, right? So from an education point of view, I'm sharing this article with you. When you should name a trust as IRA beneficiary, written by our friend Sarah Brenner. So Sarah writes here at the Slott Report, and you can follow along here if you're on the video. If you're just listening, just listen intently. You can always come back to the video because I am sharing my screen. So Sarah writes, here at the Slott Report, we hear many stories about trusts being named as IRA beneficiaries and the problems that follow. Often there seems to be no purpose for naming the trust, and it brings unnecessary complications. Trust won't help with income taxes. In fact, they can increase the tax hit because IRA funds may be subject to high trust tax rates. Naming a trust is not something that should be done without a clear purpose. Here are 6 good reasons to name a trust as an IRA beneficiary, Sarah writes. So let me just give you a little sidebar here. It used to be more popular to name trusts as beneficiaries prior to the Secure Act. So the Secure Act changed the required minimum distribution schedule for inherited IRAs significantly and in many different ways for different people in different circumstances. So that alone changed some of the reasons to have trusts as IRA beneficiaries. So if you are someone who prior to 2020 named a trust as a beneficiary, that should certainly be reviewed to make sure that it's just not a complex issue that's completely unnecessary at this point. So the first here, when we look at number 1, is minor beneficiaries. When there are minor children involved, naming a trust can be a good plan. Having a minor be named directly on a beneficiary form is a recipe for disaster because a minor cannot legally conduct business on the account. It may be possible in some cases to name a uniform trust for minor, that's a UTMA, or a UGMA, Uniform Gift to Minors account, as an IRA beneficiary, but not all custodians allow this. Paging up a little bit. Also, these accounts don't offer the ability to control funds after the minor reaches the age of majority the way a trust can. Especially with larger IRAs, when minors are involved, naming a trust as a beneficiary may be necessary. Then we have number 2, special needs beneficiaries. For special needs beneficiaries, a trust is essential to manage money and to protect government benefits when IRA funds are inherited. A special needs trust drafted to comply with the Secure and Secure 2.0 rules can still use the stretch instead of the 10-year rule, allowing payments to be paid out over the life expectancy of the special needs beneficiary. Substance abuse issues. No IRA owner would want to see their life savings support a beneficiary's drug problem or gambling addiction, for example. By naming a trust as beneficiary instead of naming a beneficiary with substance abuse issues directly on the account, controls can be put in place to ensure that this does not happen. Then we have number 4, vulnerable beneficiaries. There is no shortage of con artists and scammers looking to take advantage of vulnerable or naive beneficiaries with large inheritances. To protect these individuals, naming a trust as the IRA beneficiary can be extremely useful for limiting access and warding off those with malicious intent. Divorce concerns. Number 5, divorce concerns. While most people love their children and grandchildren, they may not feel as warmly toward the people their offspring marry. There may be concerns about money ending up in the wrong hand if marriages go south and there is a divorce. A trust named as an IRA beneficiary can alleviate these concerns. Then you have creditor protection. Now this is one most people don't think of, so pay attention to this very closely. So creditor protection. Inherited IRAs are not protected under federal law, either in bankruptcy or from other creditors. So your IRAs, your rollover IRAs transferred from 401ks have bankruptcy and some potential creditor protection. So the bankruptcy follows is set by federal law and follows any rollovers and whatnot. The creditor protection is determined by state law, so you've got to be aware of what's going on in your individual state. I did a video about this some time ago, and here we go. I said it, so I got to link it. So I'm going to link it in the description. So creditor, standby, creditor protection. Okay, so that'll be linked in the description, creditor protection video. But this is something people don't think about. So if you've got concerns, if your heirs are going to receive a portion or all of your IRAs, and maybe you don't have divorce concerns, or they're not vulnerable, or addiction, but what happens if they get sued for whatever reason? Do we want to protect those assets from creditors? We use trust to protect from creditors, predators, in-laws, and outlaws, right? So I always thought that was a kind of nice way to remember that, or a funny way to remember that. So creditors, predators, in-laws, and outlaws. That's what we use trust to protect our money from. So I didn't coin that phrase, but I think it's interesting. So just remember this: creditor protection. So I'll read it again. Inherited IRAs are not protected under federal law, either in bankruptcy or from creditors. There is some protection under state laws, but this can vary. A trust can help shield IRA funds from the beneficiary's creditors. So good information, as always, from Sarah and the Slott Group. So now we're going to have our first inaugural, I don't know if that's the right word, but our first Social Security piece here from Heather Schreiber. So Heather, again, gives us these great reports, and I took this one to share with you first. So here's the first question. So the italicized text here is the question, and I'll read it out loud to you. And if you're watching the video, you can read along. I just turned age 68 and recently filed for my Social Security retirement benefits at my local Social Security office. My wife started her benefits at age 62 6 years ago. Now that I've filed, we asked if she could receive 50% of my benefit amount as a spouse. The Social Security Administration representative said she wouldn't receive the full 50%, but something less. We're both over full retirement age. Does that sound correct? This is really common, folks. So here the spouse collected early. Now, the expectation that they have is, okay, well, when the other spouse collects at his or her full retirement age, that the spouse is then going to get the full spousal benefit, which would equal up to 50% of what the other spouse is receiving, right? The higher earning spouse. So Heather writes, yes, this is correct, but it is a scenario that often creates confusion. So because I had some commentary, let me just go back to what the question is. So the question was, the SSA representative said that she would not receive the full 50%, but something less. We're both over full retirement age. Does this sound correct? And that's because the other spouse collected early. So Heather writes, sorry, I'm losing it there. Heather writes, yes, this is correct, but it is a scenario that often creates confusion. Because your wife started her retirement benefit early, she is not eligible for the full spousal benefit once you filed and triggered her eligibility for the spousal portion. Here is a simple example that might help clarify. Example 1. John's full retirement age, FRA, that's what that means. So full retirement age benefit is $3,000, and his wife Maggie has a full retirement age benefit of $1,000. Had Maggie waited until her for retirement age to file, she would have received 100% of her $1,000 retirement benefit plus a $500 spousal boost, because 50% of John's $3,000 benefit equals $1,500, which is higher than her benefit. In total, Maggie's benefit would have been $1,500 per month. So coming up here. However, since Maggie filed at age 62, her retirement benefit was reduced to about $725. Now that John has filed and Maggie is eligible for the spousal portion, the $500 spousal amount is added to her reduced benefit amount, resulting in a total monthly benefit of $1,225 rather than the full 50% spousal amount they may have expected. To receive the full 50% spousal benefit, Maggie would have needed to wait until her full retirement age to claim her retirement benefit. Then once John filed, she would have received the full spousal benefit. So this is an example. I think that is a really great explanation of what these folks were confused about from the Social Security Administration. You have to remember that when you're calling in or going to the Social Security Administration office, you've got a chance of getting a well-seasoned, well-informed individual who can give you some good information. They're not supposed to give you advice on how to collect your Social Security. Some do. That is what it is. And some of the advice is not great, by the way. But so you've got a chance of getting a well-educated, well-informed individual, or not, right? So the information can sometimes be incorrect, and it can be confusing. So having access to someone like Heather, and this is just for our clients, folks. So Heather's a valuable member of our team. Heather reviews Social Security claiming strategies for each one of our clients and conducts analyses, and we have commentary and discussion, but it's not something we do if you just, this sometimes we see thousands and thousands of people watching these videos, and I don't want you to think that you can just send in your Social Security question and have Heather respond to it. But you can certainly take these items that we share with you as education and build that up over time. So I hope that was helpful. So that's our first share from Heather Schreiber. Let's see if we can get back on the button. Can't do that. So bear with me. And here we are. Okay, so now let's talk about the markets. So looking back last week, we had some reports that came in. So the ISM manufacturing report. So this is ending June 6th. That's what I mean when I say last week, June 6th, 2025. So we have manufacturing reports. So sentiment in the manufacturing sector came in lower, 0.2%, 2 points lower. So it came in 0.2 points lower to 48.5, while new orders, the forward-looking component, rose 0.4 points to 47.6. Prices eased 0.4 points to 69.4. So what does that mean? That means the sentiment among manufacturers remains tepid, so kind of lukewarm, but has not dropped into territory that would indicate contraction in the overall economy. This is the big concern, right? Everybody, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world with tariffs, with monetary policy, with just really global economy. So we're concerned about contraction in the overall economy, slowing in the economy. Tariffs continue to be a central concern, with China being mentioned as one of the biggest potential pain points. Then we had ISM services. So that was manufacturing. This is services. Sentiment in the service sector fell into territory depicting contraction at 49.9. So that's significant, down from 51.6. New orders also dropped from 52.3 into territory depicting contraction at 46.4. The prices index rose to 65.1 and is up 7.8 points over the past 2 months, reaching its highest level since November 2022, and is the highest 2-month increase since February to March 2021. So what does that mean? The slowing service sector and higher prices is the combination the Fed has been concerned about. And this is only one report. But tariff uncertainty is undoubtedly having a negative effect on the mood of business leaders. Then we had the labor report. Employers added 139,000 jobs in May, above the 125,000 expected, but down from the 147,000 jobs added in April. The unemployment rate remains steady at 4.2, Wage growth came in better than expected by ticking up 3.9% year over year. So what does that mean? The better than expected report helped to ease concerns that employment may be slowing after a softer than expected private payroll report earlier in the week. A solid jobs number and higher wage number likely pushes the Fed to hold rates steady for the foreseeable future. Now, let me talk about that for a second. I was reading an article early this morning about, I think it came through Bloomberg, so a reputable organization, just about the talk in Washington about the president already naming Chairman Powell's successor, Chairman Powell being the chairman of the Federal Reserve. So the Fed is responsible for, managing interest rates and controlling inflation. They have this dual mandate. So the concern is if the president suddenly says, because we all know, or most of us know, that that's not a position that the Fed chairman can't be fired, right? They finish out a term. That doesn't mean that they can't be pressured to leave, but they can't be fired. So there's discussion. Again, this is not a political topic here, but there's discussion about naming a successor when Chairman Powell's term is up. I think he has 2 years left. So the problem with that would be you can have these kind of parallel. So now you say, Mark Byelich is the incoming Fed chairman, and people could be paying attention to. I'm not, by the way, right? So, but people could be paying attention to what I say about interest rates as well as the chairman, and this kind of shadow Fed chairman would not be a good situation for our economy or the markets. We don't need any more uncertainty. So I hope that isn't something that we see, in my opinion. So here, what do we have coming up this week? We're already talked about CPI that we saw tomorrow, or we already talked about the CPI that we saw earlier today. Tomorrow, Thursday, we have PPI. So that's the producer price index. So last month we saw producer price growth ease as margins declined. So we'll have to watch to see what comes in. It's been looking at markets overall. It's been a really soft market so far this year. So let me tell you where the Dow Jones was last week. It came in at 1.23%. So last week, that's the week ending June 6, 2025, the Dow Jones was up 1.23%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is only up 1.31% for the year. The S&P 500 came in at 1.54% last week. It's only up 2.61% for the year. And the NASDAQ was up 2.2% for the week last week, only up 1.45% for the year. So really soft U.S. markets. Alternatively, if we look at the global markets, so the MSCI World Index, so that is not including the U.S., was up 0.79% last week, but up 17.64% for the year. The MSCI Emerging Market Index was up 2.29% for the week last week, up 11.35% for the year. And Europe, Asia, and the Far East was up 0.73%, 18.19% for the year. So the global markets have been very, very strong, the global stock markets. So that is just a reminder that one of our pillars is asset allocation, principal protection, and account segmentation. So one of our pillars is asset allocation. Now, everybody, you hear me say this, everybody does asset allocation, whether you do it purposely or purposefully, or you do it by chance. You have asset allocation. So we tend here in the U.S. to overweight U.S. markets. In Europe, they tend to overweight European markets, so it's just you have kind of a home-based bias, and that's fine. But you can't forget about the other markets because we've had conversations with our chief investment officer that where he shows the quilt chart of when different asset classes perform at different times, and we never know when that's going to be. So you want representation of all these different asset classes, including world markets. And this is why the U.S. markets are very, very soft so far, but we're getting really fantastic returns in the international markets. So how about bonds? So the bond market, the U.S. aggregate bond index, which is where most folks have most of their money, was down 0.44%, and it's positive 2% for the year. The U.S. aggregate index that tracks 1 to 3 year bonds was down 0.17%, and still up 2.09% for the year. High yield bonds, so they're junk bonds, right? That they call them high yield bonds to make it sound better. Well, they were up 0.32% for the year, and up, last week, and up 3.01% for the year. And we still have this inverted yield curve, which means we're getting higher interest rates for shorter term bonds and lower interest rates for longer term bonds, and that is not where we want to be, certainly in the long run. All right, so that's just a look at markets. Now we're going to get into our financial focus. This is the financial focus portion of our webinar today. So this is the last, we should be coming in, just about the 30-minute mark. And we're going to talk today about the phases of retirement spending. So we're going to talk about, we hear this phrase out there, the go, slow go, no-go year. So we're going to talk about where that came from and what it means. And is it accurate, and should you follow it? And maybe what are some alternatives? So spend a few minutes with me here, and we're going to go through that. So I'm going to share my screen here. That's not what I want. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. So let's talk about these phases of retirement spending. So let me make an adjustment here. I want to be able to draw on this screen. So where did this phrase, slow go, slow go, and no go, many of you may have heard that already, but some of you haven't. So when I mention it in classes a lot, people laugh and we joke about it, but it connects with people. I talked on our last webinar about these sound bites and cliches, and and this is not really one of those, because it has some good potential meaning behind it, and I guess the other ones have some good meaning behind it too, but they drive people probably in the wrong direction. But this is, I think, the closest to what retirement spending really looks like. So where did this phrase come from? So let's come over here. There's a lot of info. If you Google go, slow go, no go, you're going to find a lot of information. So I found reports written by financial advisors all over, Kiplinger's, and there was some information in Morningstar and Yahoo Finance, and it was just all over the place, because a lot of people are adopting this, because first of all, it's kind of cute, right? Go, slow go, no go, and it kind of makes sense. Okay, so what's that mean? Early in retirement, people spend more, right? You spend more in early in retirement because there's things that you want to do. So that makes sense. You spend more in retirement. You want to visit the grandkids, or you want to go hiking, do your photography, travel the world, whatever your thing is, you go around and you do these things. So that they're your go-go years. Now let's just look at this chart. So this chart came from Kitces.com, which is a well-respected resource for financial planners and financial advisors. So he breaks it down like this. You have age 60 here. You got your go-go years. So you start into 60, maybe 70s. And then it slows down a bit. These slow go years. Okay. So we're talking about spending here. So you're spending more in these go-go years. Now you're slowing down these slow go years. And then it says, all right, well, now these are your no-go years, and you're really not spending anything. Now, this is where we start running into problems with this, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But where did this come from? This was coined and really came from this fellow, Michael Stein. You can see here, Michael Stein, author. Read along with me here. I think you can see that. Yep, Michael Stein, author of the Prosperous Retirement, first popularized. I'll make this so we can all get it in one screen. Popularized the concept of the three-phase retirement, the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. The approach was relatively straightforward. Early retirement is represented by the go-go years, as I said, and is characterized by an active phase that may include a continuation of a lifestyle similar to pre-retirement, but with more time for spending in extra activities like travel. So that's what we see. And we've been really fortunate to help hundreds of retirees, and probably more, but we see people that say, okay, I'm going to retire at 65, I'm going to retire at 60, whatever your time is, 70, whatever it is. And there are things you want to do, and you should be able to do these things. And we're going to talk about the 4% rule. That's one of the problems with the 4% rule, is that it doesn't allow you to do the things that you want to do or that you need to do. So moving on here, the slow go years are when the health and energy, we're right here. The slow go years are when your health and energy begin to decline a bit, resulting in some spending reductions as the budget for activities like travel or even just eating out begin to decline. And the no-go years are characterized by almost total shutdown of activity related to spending as consumption decreases to just the core expenditures necessary to maintain the household itself. So that makes sense, right? Again, there are some problems with it, but this is probably the closest to what we actually see when we're talking about retirement spending. So Mike Kitces goes on to write that most retirement research assumes that retiree spending from a portfolio will seek to maintain a real inflation-adjusted standard of living throughout their retirement, just as they implicitly would have if their portfolio had been paid out as a steady pension with an annual cost of living adjustment. So what does that mean? So a lot of retirees, and this is why this method is better, in my opinion. A lot of retirees think, okay, I want to duplicate. What if I need $120,000 today, and I just want that adjusted for inflation? So there's a couple things. Well, first of all, $120,000 may not be your real number. It may be your basic number. It may include travel and all those things, but you might be putting yourself at more risk, maybe even trying to save more money than you need to maintain that, because you may not need that during your lifetime, or your investments really may not generate as much as you need, and it might make it feel limiting to you. So I had a conversation with somebody not long ago who said, I just want to live off my dividends and income. And that can be really restrictive, and it may not also be necessary. So we're going to talk about that in an upcoming webinar. But when we see things like this constant spending projection, we're talking about, the 4% rule, or living off of dividends and income. And I think both of those are seriously flawed, and we'll talk about that. But again, this is where the go-go, slow-go, and no-go years gets closer to the truth. It's just a little too simple. Okay, so and here's where it gets a little closer to the actual spending patterns in this paragraph here. In a new study contributing to the literature on the subject, David Blanchett of Morningstar has issued a new study entitled Estimating the True Cost of Retirement that finds in reality real retiree spending decreases slowly in the early years, more rapidly in the middle years, and then less slowly in the final years, in a path that looks less like a slow and steady decline and more like a retirement spending smile instead. Implicit in these results is an acknowledgement that despite the common fears, even the uptick of healthcare expenses in a retiree's later years are not enough to offset all the other spending decreases that tend to occur as retirees transition to the no-go years and other discretionary expenses fall significantly. Now, that's, again, not my experience. We see that healthcare increases can be significant. We see people who there is a danger zone as far as assets. And it's really, close to 1 to 5 million. You've got a real chance of spending down all of your money if one or both of you needs long-term care. But so it's not something you want to be cavalier about when you read things like, well, the expenditures for medical expenses really might be offset by the decline in other things, because we can suddenly be spending 180, 200,000 or more for medical expenses. But there's a way to cover that as well. And I'm just going to put a note here, and we're going to discuss legacy longevity when we talk about that. So this is where it comes from. So let's check off that box. So we talked about where does this phrase come from. So we talked about Michael Stein. We talked about what does it mean, right? We talked about how Michael Stein posited that we've got these 3 phases: go-go years, slow-go years, and no-go years. What does that mean? And we talked about, is it accurate, right? So there's studies that show that it looks more like this retirement smile. There's a lot of math behind this, but this is really you can see here now we're looking at age 60. We're going to age 90. I would say that this needs to be a higher, I cut that off. Age 60 is here. Age 90, we at least want to project to 95, especially for a married couple. But you'll see instead of this, decline. So what Stein had said is if we're at 60 here, we kind of start here and we draw down and then we level off. But correctly here, this shows that it continues to go up. Now, the way I like to illustrate it is this. If your retirement year, let's say this is your retirement, I think you can see that, whatever year that is, the goal is to reach, have your money left until you're no longer here. And the flaw, we're going to talk about the 4% rule in a second, and I'll just say, let's talk about that now. Here's just an example of one of the flaws of the 4% rule is that it's a moving target, first of all. So this is from the Morningstar State of Retirement Income Report in 2024. This came out in December of 2024, so it's the most recent article on this, and you can see where I got it from here. But it writes, as in the past, we incorporated forward-looking asset classes, returns, and inflation assumptions to arrive at a starting safe withdrawal rate for new retirees, excluding Social Security or other non-portfolio income sources. So they're saying this is a safe amount potentially to withdraw from your portfolio. So Morningstar is well respected. Morningstar's 2024 research suggests that 3.7% is the highest safe starting withdrawal rate for retirees spending from an investment portfolio, assuming a 90% probability of having funds remaining at the end of an assumed 30-year retirement period. So 90% probability of having funds left at the end of a 30-year retirement period. And we're looking at 3.7% withdrawal as opposed to what we hear all the time, which is this 4% rate. And this is BS, right? So this is whatever initials you want to put on that. That 4% rate is really just BS. And there's a few different reasons for that, but one of them is it's always a moving target. But the problem back here with the 4% rule is that if you've got, let's use $1 million, for example. You've got $1 million. 4% of $1 million only gives you $40,000 before tax. That's BT before tax. And now that we're at 3.7, right? So that's 4%. 3.7%, of course, gives you $37,000 before tax. Listen, I don't know where you live or what you're doing, but $37,000 may not give you what you want to do in retirement. Because the 4% rule, or this steady withdrawal rule, let's just call it. So it's really not just it. Morningstar accurately said it's should be 3.7% starting rate as opposed to 4, because the 4% rule, people kind of missed this part. So this fellow William Benjamin proposed this, I think, back in 1991. But he proposed this 4% rule. And first of all, you've got to have a correct mix of stocks versus bonds, and they all have to perform very, very well. And the growth assumptions are much higher than certainly what we're seeing today. But then the 4% has to be increased every year for inflation, right? It's not just a steady 4%. So what it does is it gives you a line kind of like this, right? Or you can take it a little higher if you want a line like that. So that may be fine, but what it does is it doesn't give you that ability to spend more early in retirement. It just assumes that things are going to cost more. You're going to have this steady flow of income, kind of like a pension, with a cost of living allowance. But this is where I like the go, slow go, no go kind of mentality. It's just that the application needs to be very specific to the individual, right? We can't just take these cute, catchy phrases and say, oh, well, I'm going to spend whatever I would need to spend because I'm in my go years. And I'm going to slow down at some point, and then I'm not going to spend anything because I'm in my no-go years. But that's not safe either, and there's far too much risk in that. So with 4%, you carry the risk of not being able to do what you want to do, or any of the steady withdrawal strategies, whether it's 4% or 3.7% or whatever it is for this year. Because instead of this straight line, this just kind of slow, and steady growth, what the go, slow go, no go implies is that you're spending more here, spending less here, and spending very little here. But what reality tells us is that it really looks like this, right? And this goes back to that retirement smile that they talked about. Because you spend more here, let's spend what we want. Don't limit yourself to let me back that up. Let's spend what we can during early phases of retirement, because you've worked for it. Hopefully you've done the work, and you've identified what you need, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But let's have that spending here in the early years when you're healthy and you can do things. You can travel, you can see people, you can do all the things that you want to do. There's definitely going to be a wane. And as we reach it depends on who you are, as we reach our late 70s, maybe early 80s, mid 80s. My mother-in-law is 85 years old and she's still very active. So she's still going. She's a little slow goer, but she's still pretty much going. But she's certainly not no going. But here's the increase here that we see on this other side of it is medical expenses for many, many people. So remember, as a married couple, if you're a married couple, you got a 70% chance, actually a little bit greater, of needing long-term care, some form of long-term care in your retirement. So that is something you want to pay attention to. You don't want to get until to age 90 to age 85 and just be out of money because you go too much. So how do you overcome that? So the go, no go, or go, slow go, no go, again, is attractive. It's cute. It's catchy. And it almost gets you there. How you really get there full time fully is, again, using the account segmentation strategy and proper and complete and comprehensive financial planning. So I should do another video about, comprehensive financial planning. I'm doing air quotes here if you're just listening, because many people say they do comprehensive financial planning, but my gosh, it's razor thin. Folks, you really got to do the work. You got to do the work. I've shared with you that we have an 8-week process for our financial plan. If you don't know what that is, you can go to our website, attleboroughwealth.com, and you can look under our services and process, and you can find it in either one of those pages. There's even there's videos about it, but the 8 weeks I found is kind of the perfect time point, because that allows us to meet every 2 weeks and keep that cadence going. So coming out of 2 months of engagement, you have a full financial plan that should be beginning to be implemented. And then, of course, you've heard me say this, you review it every single year. Vitally important to review it every year and keep that plan updated. So you really want a full, comprehensive financial plan. And if you're not getting that, then you should look elsewhere. And the first indication is that when you say how much you need in retirement, so if you tell your financial planner, hey, I need $10,000 a month, if they just take that and plug it into their system, in my opinion, they're not doing their job. You really have to dig in and find out if that amount is truly $10,000 a month, or if it's $11,000, $12,000, $15,000. So I know many of you, especially you folks that are listening to this, may be very detailed, and I've had people come in and say, I've been tracking my expenses for the last 35 years in a spreadsheet. Love to show you the spreadsheet. They love to show off their work, and I appreciate that. But we can usually always find something that adds to those expenses potentially, because that's that's why we do what we do. We identify needs, goals, and issues that you may not be considering. So what is account segmentation? You've heard me talk about it a gajillion times on here, but and you determine in these segments how much money you need. So segments are typically by years, typically 0 to 3 years, 4 to 6 years, 7 to 9 years, 10 to 13 years, 14 to 15, 16 years, 17 through 19, and then you can continue out there. So when I go back I'll go back to the article in a second, but once you identify these segments of time, then you can build portfolios to manage each portion of the funds that you need, so that you're not just relying on 1 or 2 or 3 portfolios that are going to fund your entire lifetime. You've got very specific investment portfolios designed to fund your life when you need it. So that helps eliminate worry about if the market drops 30% or only closes for the year at 1%, how am I going to live? How's that going to affect my retirement? And so that's I refer to that as the worry zone, and that usually sits right about here in these segments. And it also overcomes this, what we call FOMO, and need for more investment growth. Because as we go out in your timeline, as determined by your needs, we increase the growth potential of these individual portfolios, and we call these segments. So you have segment 1, segment 2, segment 3, segment 4, segment 5, and typically what we call legacy longevity, and I'll come back to that. But how do you figure out how much money you need in each one of these segments? Well, you do the work. You do the financial planning work. The financial planning drives the amount that goes into each one of these segments. Now, look at this. I'm putting $3 signs in 0 to 3. And for those of you who are just listening, so I've got a whole chart, kind of a timeline laid out, and I show the different segments. But now I have $3 signs in segments 0 to 3, and $3 signs, which means more money, in years 4 to 6. But maybe years 7 to 9, we only have 2, and maybe 2 here. And maybe, 1 here. So if you think about, here we go. Go. And here we go. Maybe slow go. Maybe. Or maybe slow goes here. And it's all different for you, right? And you have to do this every year. If you like this phrase, slow go, slow go, no go, then you got to figure out where your slow go, or your go, slow go, and no goes are. And then you've got to make sure that you're covered for things that may happen in no-go and extra funds you may need. So you figure out what you need in each segment and you fund it appropriately. Now, you'll see that I highlighted this legacy longevity section. So legacy longevity typically is an amount that we identify that, and let me just call this out here, make it a little clearer. So legacy longevity, that's legacy funds that you may leave to the next generation or whomever is your legacy. Could be charities, could be whatever. Or longevity. Well, what if I'm here longer than 85, 90, 95, 100, and I need care? Well, that money is either going to go to your legacy, or it's going to be here to fund your longevity if you need it, or if you just want to do other things along the way. What if you're still going at age 80 and you say, well, geez, I'd like to travel the world in a sailboat? Well, we might say, well, we've built up quite a bit of money here in this legacy longevity, and because you're doing proper financial planning every year, you determine that you're going to have a potential surplus, even if you need long-term care. Hey, you can fund that sailing trip maybe. But that makes more sense to me than just these cute little phrases of go, slow go, no go, and certainly just makes much more sense than some crazy 4%, 3.7% rule that potentially puts you at risk of the lifestyle that you want or deserve in retirement. So this legacy longevity is how we overcome this portion here. Let's go back to this article, right, where it reads, healthcare expenses in a retiree's later years are not enough to offset all the other spending decreases that occurs as retirees transition in no-go years, and other discretionary expenses fall significantly. So they're saying the healthcare increases could have a significant impact, and how you identify that or how you cover that is that legacy longevity. So that makes sense, right? The account segmentation. So that's just one pillar, and we have the other pillars. So we talked about asset allocation. We talked about that in the beginning of the webinar today. So we have pillar number 1 is asset allocation. Pillar number 2 is principal protection. So you want something that is that can't go below 0 in any given year and can have some upside potential, 3 to 6% a year, a bond-like alternative with no risk of principal. And ideally, you want some guaranteed lifetime income on that, like a pension or Social Security. And ideally, by the time you're withdrawing it, it's tax-free and like a Roth IRA. Number 3, of course, is what I explained to you up here, and that is account segmentation. So just I think, kind of in conclusion here, I think the go, slow go, no go phraseology is fine, and it's good, and it's closest to reality. I just think that it's a little too simplistic, and we want to just have a real plan and really have the work done so that we can identify what's for you. The difficulty is that you have to find the right people to do that. And I talk about your retirement team. Now here we go. And we're going to add that to the description too. So in the description of this video, we're going to have creditor protection. We're going to have, of course, the 3 pillars, because that's just standard. That's in everything. And we're going to have how to build out your retirement team. So like I tell you, folks, we can't help everybody directly, but you should have somebody directly who can help you figure out and work through your go-go, slow-go, and no-go years, and pay attention to that potential up return that we're talking about, which makes more sense, right? This potential up return, because we can't just put our head in the sand. We can't just say, hey, we're not going to need additional expenses later in our retirement. You got to plan for it. Hopefully it doesn't happen to you, and you can pass the money to your heirs or spend more during your lifetime. But you don't want to be in a position where you haven't considered it at all and haven't planned for it. So I hope that was helpful to you today. We'll continue working through these phrases and myths and misconceptions as we come across them. The next one I have planned is, can I live off of dividends and income? And that's a big one. I've been hearing that more and more, so I just want to make sure that we cover that. So that is the webinar for today. I hope it was helpful. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe, like, and notification buttons on these YouTube videos, because you'll be notified first when we have the recordings done and when we schedule live broadcasts. And I always like to see it. I appreciate the feedback. Let me know what you thought about the Heather Schreiber Social Security section earlier in the webinar. And if you're just joining us for the financial focus part of this, you can always go back to the full weekly webinar where I talk about some updates from the Slott Group regarding IRA strategies around distribution and tax planning. We just added a section about Social Security from our Social Security analyst, Heather Schreiber, and we talk about the markets. So we look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you all have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.